What if I told you the Roman Empire wasn't powered by glory or gold, but by a logistical operation so massive it would make modern corporations weep? At its height, the empire was a sprawling civilization of over 50 million people. From the foggy edges of Britain to the scorching deserts of Syria, its cities were buzzing. And right in the middle of it all was Rome, a megalopolis of 1 million people, the biggest city the planet had ever seen. How did Rome build a food supply chain so sophisticated that it could stop mass starvation in its tracks and fuel an empire for 1,000 years? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the incredible machine and the key territories that Rome leaned on to satisfy its world-changing appetite. But have you ever actually stopped to think about what it took to feed all of them? Every single day. Millions of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And they managed it all without refrigeration, without modern tractors, without any of the tech we totally take for granted. 1 million people, all crammed into one massive city. That's 1 million mouths to feed, 3 times a day, every single day. The amount of food they needed is just staggering. To put it in perspective, historians figure an army of 40,000 soldiers would burn through about 60 tons of grain a day. Now, imagine that demand for a city more than 20 times bigger. Specifically, wheat, for pretty much everyone, from the poorest guy in a Roman slum to the legionary on the frontier. Grain was the undisputed king of their diet. They ate it as bread if they had an oven, but more often it was a thick, hearty porridge called pulls. This was a state-run system to get grain into the hands of Roman citizens. At first, they sold it at a stable, low price to stop people from starving during a shortage. But by 58 BC, a politician named Clodius Pulcher made the whole thing completely free for eligible citizens, a move that was popular, to say the least. For a city that massive, relying on local agriculture was like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. Italian farmers had mostly pivoted away from growing boring old wheat to more profitable stuff like grapes for wine and olives for oil. This meant that for its daily bread, for its very survival, Rome had to look outward to the provinces. Each guy got a token, which he could swap for his monthly supply, usually enough to bake about a loaf of bread a day. For a small family, this system was an insane political tool. Control the food, and you control the people. It bought loyalty, squashed unrest, and became a cornerstone of imperial power. But it also meant Rome was completely, utterly dependent on a constant fire hose of grain from its provinces. It was close. It was reliable. Sardinia also did its part, pitching its harvest into the pot for the hungry capital. Together, these breadbaskets were a network of agricultural powerhouses, all chained to Rome by its endless need for grain. The empire relied on a few super-fertile regions that became its official breadbaskets. This is where the Romans' genius for organization really shines. They built a logistical machine that was just breathtakingly complex. So how did they pull it off? These places were so productive, they didn't just help feed Rome. They also fed the legions stationed in the area. They used specially built merchant ships. These were absolute units. Massive cargo vessels that could carry over 1,000 tons of wheat. Smaller barges were loaded up and then painstakingly hauled up the Tiber River by teams of oxen or men, just trudging along the river banks. The whole insane operation was managed by a powerful official, the prefectus and whose one and only job was to make sure this food pipeline never, ever broke. It was a perfectly synchronized system of ships, ports, warehouses, and bureaucrats performing a daily miracle, feeding a city of 1 million. These ships sailed in huge convoys, mostly between spring and fall to avoid the nasty winter storms. It was all built around what historians call the Mediterranean triad: grain, grapes, and olives. Think of Ostia as Rome's front door to the world. Wine was almost always watered down, and olive oil wasn't just for cooking, it was fuel for lamps and even what they used to get clean. It came from cheaper stuff like legumes, lentils, chickpeas, and beans were everywhere and packed with nutrients. They also ate veggies like cabbage and leeks, and fruits like figs, dates, and apples. Here, the grain was unloaded into enormous state-owned warehouses called *Coria*. Some of these warehouses were colossal, big enough to rival the Colosseum in size, built to store mountains of grain, olive oil. A poor Roman might be living on porridge and veggies, but a rich person's dinner party was a total spectacle. We're talking lavish banquets with wild boar, venison, and even peacock or flamingo. In a truly bizarre show of wealth, one of the most prized delicacies was the dormouse, which they would fatten up in little terracotta jars before roasting. Seriously, garum was a fermented fish sauce, made from the guts and blood of fish left to basically rot in the sun. It sounds disgusting, but it was the Roman ketchup or soy sauce salty, savory flavor bomb they added to almost everything, and a sour wine called posca*, which was basically vinegar and water. Think of it as ancient Gatorade. It was a balanced diet built for endurance. The state knew that a well-fed army was a disciplined army. The military supply chain made sure legions operating deep in enemy territory could be reliably fed, allowing them to project Roman power to the ends of the earth. And wine, acting as a buffer in case a shipment got delayed. It was the raw agricultural power of its provincial bread baskets, especially Egypt and North Africa, churning out insane amounts of grain. It was the political genius of the asterisk and known asterisk, the grain dole that kept the capital fed and quiet. Its success was a testament to Roman organization, engineering, and pure ambition, a system that let their civilization grow to a scale nobody had ever imagined and keep it going for centuries. And it was the logistical mastery of a complex web of ships, ports, and roads that tied it all together across thousands of miles. First, let's get our heads around the sheer scale of this problem. Picture Rome in the 2nd century AD. The Roman army was the most dominant fighting force of its time, and it absolutely marched on a full stomach. Was it the free grain, the giant ships, or the fact they ate dormice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. The local farms around Rome were decent, but they just couldn't hang. The Nile flooded so predictably every year that it created insanely fertile land. That produced a reliable, massive surplus. Every year, a giant fleet of ships would sail from Alexandria, carrying a lifeline of grain that the capital was desperate for. And failure? Not an option. Each soldier got about 2 pounds of whole wheat a day, which he had to grind himself with a personal hand mill. This was actually a brilliant logistical move. Whole grains last way longer than flour. From that, they make their own bread, biscuits, or that good old porridge, pulls asterisk. If you think ancient logistics are as cool as we do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the machinery that powered the ancient world. A hiccup in the food supply wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a threat to the stability of the whole empire. Empty stomachs lead to riots, and riots could get emperors killed. So the food question was way more than just sustenance, it was political survival. The emperor's whole gig rested on his ability to keep the people fed, a concept the poet Juvenal famously roasted as bread and circuses. So, what was the magic bullet? If you had to pick one food that was the foundation of the Roman world, it was grain. To manage this supercritical resource, the Roman state cooked up one of the most ambitious welfare programs in history, the asterisk cura annani asterisk, or the grain dole. At its peak, the asterisk and nona asterisk was giving free grain to as many as 200,000 adult men in Rome. If Italy couldn't feed Rome, who could? The undisputed champion was Egypt. After Augustus nabbed it, the Nile Valley basically became the emperor's personal wheat farm, and his main job was to pump grain to Rome. But Egypt wasn't flying solo. The provinces of North Africa, what we call Tunisia, and Algeria today were a close second. And you can't forget the islands. Sicily, Rome's very first province, had been a key source of grain forever. Getting the grain was one thing. Getting it to Rome was a whole other level of challenge. The main way they moved it was by sea. It was way cheaper and faster to ship grain across the entire Mediterranean than to drag it 75 miles overland. Their destination was the port of Ostia, right at the mouth of the Tiber River. From Ostia, the grain started the final leg of its journey. It is just wild to think about the level of coordination it took to pull this off 2,000 years ago. Of course, You can't live on porridge alone. While grain was the staple, the Roman diet was more varied than you'd think. Wine and olive oil were life. Everybody, rich or poor, consumed them constantly. For your average Roman, protein didn't come from a big steak. And then there was ***. You can't talk about Roman food without mentioning this infamous sauce. But the diets of the rich and poor were worlds apart. The Roman food system wasn't just about feeding the folks back home. It was about fueling its military. A legionary's diet was all about high-energy fuel. The main part of their ration was, surprise, surprise, grain. This was supplemented with other basics. They got bacon or other cured meats, cheese, vegetables. So, what fed the Roman Empire's massive appetite? It wasn't just one thing, but this incredible mix of factors. From the simple bowl of porridge eaten by a commoner to the wine and olive oil everyone relied on. From the rations that fueled the war machine to the roasted dormice on a senator's table. The Roman food system was the invisible engine that made the empire run. What do you think was the most impressive part of Rome's food machine?